I'd like to take this time and welcome moderator Nicole Trimble, Executive Director from Impact Hiring Initiative, to the stage.
Hi, we have a treat for you with this panel and the speakers around impact hiring. But I want to take a moment to explain what we mean by impact hiring. It's a little jargony. We might as well say opportunity employment. And we all heard this morning Dr. Porter say, and I'm quoting him, is that growing inequality is the greatest threat facing the world. And lack of opportunity, sustainable employment, living wage jobs are leading to that growing inequality. So what we're going to be discussing this afternoon is the business advantage of opening our aperture around who talent is and where we can find talent. The business opportunity in the US alone, and I know we have a global crowd, but I believe the business opportunity is just as large, if not bigger, is that we have 4 million unfilled positions in the front line in the US. And over the next 10 years, a projection of 10 million new jobs that we will not be able to fill in skilled sectors like tech and healthcare. And so on the supply side, that's the demand side. On the supply side, right now, we have 5.5 million young people between 16 and 24 who aren't working and aren't in school. And so how we match up the supply of talent with our needs is what I'm really excited to share with you this afternoon. And so one of the things that I hear, I'm really lucky I get to work with the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions, and they have this group called Opportunity Youth United. And one of the things that they say often is nothing about us without us. And it's really become a mantra that runs in my head. And so as the panel and the SBI team were building what we were going to talk with you about, it became clear that we really wanted to have a youth voice. So I'm so thrilled to have Deshawn Hightower. Come on up, Deshawn. So Deshawn is a business and training specialist at Old Navy. He's going to tell you a lot more about himself. But having him tell his story, I think, is so brave. I'm nervous in front of all of you. But as we walked in today, he said, "This is it? No problem." So good luck.
I'm not used to just standing here, so I'm going to move around a little bit. Okay. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here with all of you today. Before This Way Ahead, I thought a job was just about collecting a paycheck. Now I know a job can change your life. I grew up in the Bronx with my mom and my 2 younger sisters. My mother was an extremely hardworking single parent. At times, she put in long hours at 2 jobs just to support us. And it wasn't always easy. At the age of 3, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer. If they didn't take out my whole kidney, the cancer was going to spread. After going through the surgery, I went through 2 years of chemotherapy. With just 1 kidney, my mom was really, really overprotective of me. I couldn't play any sports, no football, no basketball, and she really didn't want me hanging outside on the block because of my medical issues. I spent a lot of my time and my energy trying to help out at home. By the time I was 14, I started getting both of my sisters up in the morning. I had to get all 3 of us out the door by 6:30 in the morning so I could get to school by 8. That was 1 bus, 2 trains, and an hour and a half later, I was in class. That summer, I got my first paying job at the summer youth program for the New York City doing gardening and landscaping. I made a little money, but no one was teaching me how to be a professional or how to build a resume. And I wasn't planning on watering trees my whole life. I definitely needed more. It was my guidance counselor who told me about This Way Ahead. I remember him saying, "We're going to pay you to give you business acumen." I didn't really know what business acumen was, but I was really excited. And my mom was skeptical at first, but she seen how motivated I was, and she finally gave in. And I interned at the Harlem Old Navy store on 125th Street with my manager, Loretta, who's sitting right there. After being late and being written up a couple times, my other manager, Yura, who's from Antigua, pulled me to the side and said, Deshaun, what did you want to do with this opportunity? I thought I had joined the program just to be a sales associate and just to collect a check. She made me realize that it was only the beginning. And if I worked hard enough, I could grow within the company. That's all it took to turn me around. Once I knew what was possible, I started asking lots of questions. How can I learn about pricing? What's the next step for me? After pricing, I said, can I learn about the money? Because everybody loves money. They trained me to be a cash handler. One day, the loss prevention team came through the store, and I was fascinated. When they gave us the tour of the back room with the cameras, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an FBI agent. Like, the rush was amazing. After 3 years with Old Navy, today I'm a training business operations specialist at a flagship store on Old Navy Street, in Old Navy in Manhattan. If you want to learn something new, I'm the person you train with. And I tell all my trainees, if you're willing to grow, I'm here to help you. And tomorrow I will start my official role as a This Way Ahead intern manager. I'm helping do to others what this program did for me. Because of the professional guidance I received from This Way Ahead, now I have the skills to be successful at any job, and not just Old Navy. This opportunity has allowed me to help my mother financially. I helped pay the rent. I paid for my sister's school pictures. I even helped book my other sister's baby shower. With my first paycheck, I went and bought my mom some sneakers. Because, boy, let me tell you, she loves sneakers. She actually took a picture of them, and she keeps the picture so she knows the first thing I gave to her out of my hard-earned money. It feels so good to be productive, and I wish there was a way to reach all my friends and neighbors just at home chilling on the block. Everybody deserves a chance to be developed, not just for a job, but a career. This program isn't just good for young people, it's good for business. This Way Ahead graduates who become employees stay with the store twice as long as their coworkers in the same cities. Gap Inc. has given 1 million young people their first job and has set a goal to reach 10,000 people with This Way Ahead by 2020. That's 10,000 opportunities. By 2025, 5% of our new hires in our store will come from This Way Ahead. I'm so proud to be working for a company that's committed to doing more than just selling clothes. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. So I'd like to invite the panel up. I worked at the Gates Foundation when Jeff Rakes was there, and he's a Nebraskan farmer, so he used a lot of farm lore. And he used to say, it's work. Some days you're shoveling in the stalls, and some days you're riding the tractor. And this is definitely a tractor riding moment because the opportunity to hear from Deshaun and to be on this panel with people I admire so much about work that we all care deeply about is quite an opportunity. So I'm going to encourage you through the app, Slido, to ask questions of the panel as well as Deshaun. He'll come back up when we do the question and answer session. So I want to start by introducing this panel. So next to me is Gail Gershon. And I met Gail about 6 years ago at a conference like this and heard a little bit about This Way Ahead, and that was the beginning of my shared value crush with Gap Inc. Because as you heard from Deshaun, this is really good for society, for young people, but what you're going to hear from Gail is how this is really good also for the business. And one of the things that Gail may not tell you is that her grit, determination, business savvy, and love for these young people is why this is where it is today. This was not an easy road. It's been a long one. Guys are out of order. That's good. Melody Barnes is I'm going to read her litany of things she's doing at the moment, but she's the CEO of MB Squared Solutions, which I found are not only her initials, but her husband's, which is why it's squared, which is very cool. Has several positions at NYU Stern School of Public Policy, sits on many corporate, philanthropic, and nonprofit boards, and is the chair of Aspen's Forum for Community Solutions, which we at FSG get to work really closely with and share offices with. We're really lucky. But many of you probably know Melody. You're like, how do I know that name? She was the assistant to the president at the White House, yeah, that president, and the director of the White House Domestic Policy Council under President Obama. And so that could feel a little intimidating, and I was telling her staff that, and they're like, oh my gosh, she's the nicest, most humble, funniest person. She'll put you at ease. And I was like, that might be cooler than White House, that your staff says that about you. And Ben Hassan is the Chief Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer at Walmart. But you come to that from 35 years. Is that true, really? You start when you were what, 7? 30?
I am way older than I look.
Good work. 35 years in the tech industry. And Doug McMillan came to you a couple years ago and asked you to take on this role of really building a culture of diversity and inclusion at Walmart. And here you are after, I think we've all heard a little bit today about Walmart and their move towards being an employer of choice, and so I'm excited to talk about that. But I want to kick this off with Gail. We heard from Deshaun, and I think we all were pretty moved by his story, but I would love to hear a little bit about the origin story of This Way Ahead and how This Way Ahead is bringing business value and ROI to Gap Inc. and the brands that you represent.
Okay, great. So way back in 2006, not 35 years ago, but 2006, so about 10 years ago, we paused what we were doing at Gap Foundation. Gap Foundation is the philanthropic arm, and I will use that word philanthropic for the company, which includes Gap, Banana Republic, Old Navy, Athleta, and Intermix. And in thinking about what potentially we could do, a couple of things started to resonate for us. One, we met with people like Jane Nitzer from Columbia, who talked a lot about brain development in adolescence. And how many people have teenagers at home or teenagers in their lives? So what a lot of us think about is little children when we think about brain development, 0 to 5. In fact, there's some pretty remarkable stuff that happens in those later years for teenagers. And one of the ways to really stimulate all those synapses, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm sure I'll say it wrong, but all that good brain stuff is a job. So we thought that was pretty interesting. Secondly, we saw a lot of the research that looks at long-term earning potential, and for youth who get a job around 16, 18, certainly before their mid-20s, they will earn more over the balance of their life. They're less likely to get involved in a lot of the negative behaviors that might happen otherwise. Thirdly, we acknowledge that, goodness gracious, at Gap Inc., we have lots and lots of stores and lots of jobs. And it seemed like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't we want to tap into that? Especially when we met with nonprofits and grantees of the foundation who said, that's great that you're giving us a grant for our job training program, but the reality is what we'd actually like a lot more than just the grant is the connection to get those youth jobs in your stores after they're trained. So we created This Way Ahead as a kind of a small pilot program. The first year we had 25 participants, and we thought that was really great. And it was here in New York City. We partnered with a nonprofit organization called The Door that some of you may know if you're New Yorkers. And we slowly grew the program. Our 3 bigger brands participate, Gap, Banana, and Old Navy. And eventually we added another city, a few more cities after that. And when we started to follow the data on the youth who participated, what we found was something pretty extraordinary, which was that the youth, as Deshaun said, the This Way Ahead employees, or employees who started through This Way Ahead, had double the retention rate when compared to their peers. They had some of the highest engagement scores in the company. So I don't know how many people are in retail, but those engagement scores that measure an employee's enthusiasm and commitment, that's really important if you're on the sales floor and you're interacting with customers. So having a high engagement score in retail is super valuable to us. We also learned that a significant percent of youth self-identified as minority, and diversity is really important to us as a company. So we tracked the data over time, and we saw that this is actually a really good talent strategy. So again, we started with the community impact probably first and foremost, but you might even call it accidental shared value because it has turned into a super valuable talent strategy for Gap Inc. stores.
And quick follow-up to that. So when it started in the foundation,
Right.
the work you lead. Where does it live now in the company?
It is now a true partnership with our brands. So Gap, Banana Republic, and Old Navy are active advocates. They cover the internships. They do all the work with their stores, intern manager training. So I would really say increasingly it's becoming a brand initiative, not so much a foundation initiative. And Deshaun also mentioned, but just to reinforce, the long-term goal is that 5% of entry-level talent in our stores will all come from this way ahead. And then it just becomes a sustainable part of our talent pipeline. In order to do that, though, this really has to be embraced and supported by the brands. And they're the ones with the budgets, frankly, the bigger budgets than I have. And that's all going to be possible. That 5% ongoing talent pipeline will be possible as a result of the brand's commitment.
Thanks. You can see why I have a bit of a shared value crush here. It's both good for the business and incredibly positive for the young people that This Way Ahead's working with. And as we talk about entry-level talent, we were just, as we were preparing, Ben reminded me that in the US alone, Walmart has 1.5 million employees. Just wrap your minds around that for a second. And so, Ben, knowing that your talent pool is so huge, my question for you is, how do you both personally and Walmart define talent? And what are you doing to grow talent, both in their current jobs and to the next level?
Great question. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for allowing us to be a part of the conversation. And I've been with Walmart now 10 years, and it's interesting to get the kind of comments that Dr. Porter mentioned today. 10 years ago was something that wouldn't have happened. And so I shot my CEO a couple notes early, and I said, Dr. Porter's already mentioned this twice. Don't mess up, Doug.
You're like, and he's stealing my thunder from my panel.
His response was, don't you mess up. So the conversation is really important to me, and particularly the job that I'm in today. I think most people know how big Walmart is. We've got a lot of people that work for the company. There's also another 600,000 who work in international. But it's ultimately our customers that help us shape our jobs. So if you think about this notion, there are 140 million customers who shop our stores every week. And we are the second highest trafficked e-commerce site in the US. And so we have a frontline seat to see how technology is transforming our customers' lives and the way they shop. So we've got to transform the way that we work internally, and we can't transform in the future because the future is already here. So I can tell you, though, that we're optimistic. We invested $2.7 billion in the last 2 years on training and education for our associates and for higher wages for our associates in the stores and clubs. And we've opened 200 academies that are actually located in 200 different stores, actually train folks in new technologies and how to actually perform out on the floor. And so I can't stress enough how important training is for us and the fact that it is core to our ongoing strategy. Our belief is that though robotics and technology, I'm a tech geek, I love tech, you're always going to need people. And so we believe we'll be people-led in the retail field, and we'll enable those people with technology. And so that means we've got to empower our associates with the skills and the technology and the confidence to actually perform their job every day as we continue to try to compete against what's happening with the customer base as they shift to the e-commerce space. And they walk in our stores with technology many times better than the technology that our associates have in the stores. So this convergence that's happening in our business is so important for us, and we've got to actually have a talented group of associates who are able to work in that environment. So we're excited about the path that we're on.
Yeah. And one of the things you said to me about the academies that was really exciting is that you have 200 of them. And can you explain why you chose to have so many of them instead of bringing people to centralized locations?
Yeah, we so this because we have 4,000 plus stores and clubs in the U.S. and to have 3 or 4 or 10 academies would be transporting people, many of who don't have transportation or barely have transportation to get to work. So our thought process was, let's put them in locations that are within a 10 to 15 mile radius from where folks work. And some of the academies are actually in the stores where people will be hired in that store. So they'll train in the academy, go out on the floor, experience the work, and go back in the academy and actually be trained on site.
And reduces the barriers of things like transportation and
Exactly.
childcare for them to skill up. It's fabulous. So Melody, Gerald Chartavian, who is the CEO and founder of Year Up, where Melody is on the board, is fond of saying that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so as a businesswoman, as a policymaker, as a social change agent, you have your view into both the demand side of business and the supply side of the young people. So one of my questions for you is, what's keeping business leaders up at night around talent? And then what promising or exciting practices do you see, like the ones we just heard about, that are helping bridge this divide between supply and demand?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And again, it's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon, this evening. And just picking up on what Gail and Ben have been talking about, I remember when I was sitting in the White House and I would talk to CEOs, and because we were working on workforce training and rethinking our workforce system in the United States. And often they would say to me, if my shareholders knew how much time I spent thinking about these issues, about training and education, they would be stunned. And then after working in the administration and working with corporate clients, sitting on corporate boards, I can see that from the other side. You know, we're constantly thinking about talent, and it is the lifeblood of the business. You know, where are we going to find talent? A big issue, because it affects where you're going to site your businesses, where will a new facility be, where your customers are going to be, do you have people to serve and to support those businesses? And how are you getting the best people, particularly when you're thinking about your competitors? Often people are fishing, I like to say they're fishing in the same pond. You know, everybody's pulling up to the Harvard pond and dropping in their fishing line. And then I've seen clients say, well, that isn't going to work, so maybe I'll try I'll go crazy and I'll go to the University of California pond and drop my fish line there. But over and over and over, people are finding that they've got to identify new places to find talent. And one of the things that we're seeing is that people, I think smart businesses, CEOs and HR managers and frontline business operations managers are finding that we've got to be more creative and think more critically about what our real skills are, what is it that we really need, and what skills does that require, and where can we find people that have those skills or train them so that they're working well for us. So I think that's one of the things. Where are we going to find talent? Are they properly trained? And not making the mistake of the mismatch. You know, I've got to have someone with a 4-year degree from, tier A school, when in fact, what you need is someone who's got maybe 2 years of community college, or they've got a certificate and a very specific skill set, and they do that job really well, mixed with the other set of skills, and often we call them soft skills, and I learned a new term, which I love, which is power skills. Because soft skills are not soft, and they're not easy, and they're absolutely critical. Another thing that Gerald often says is that we hire for skills and we fire for behavior. So we've got to find people who know how to work in the workplaces that we're managing. And then finally, the other thing that people are often thinking about is retention. Not only, so we've got the right people, they're trained properly, but are they going to stay? And the resources that we've put into that training or the hiring, are we going to get a return on investment in that young person or in that middle-aged person that we brought into our company? So those are the general categories that I often hear and often see in the work that I do. At the same time, you asked about what I'm seeing that looks good and interesting. You know, in the K-12 context, for example, we're seeing interesting academy work, apprenticeships, and I know a lot of you are not necessarily based in the United States. I think the United States has a lot to learn from the apprenticeship work that we're seeing overseas. For a long time, and I remember this in high school, and if you were in the honors classes and people looked at those who were getting apprenticeships or technical skills, and it's like people were being tracked into those careers as opposed to recognizing that those were good careers, and with a baseline of very good education, everyone could have an opportunity perhaps to go into a career that they were interested in that required that set of skills. So we're seeing, I think, the smarter use of apprenticeships and the building of that sector in the United States. In the post-secondary context, we're seeing more, better relationships or growing relationships between the private sector and community colleges, for example. And for a long time, people were talking past one another. Employers needed something, community colleges were providing a curriculum, and often they had nothing to do with one another. But now we're seeing more and more of a relationship and employers saying to community college presidents and those developing curriculum, this is what we need, and beyond this is what we need, this is how we can work together. I mean, some of the most interesting programs, and there's a program at the Aspen Institute that focuses on community college excellence, and you would be fascinated, if you don't already know, about some of the work between community colleges and employers in the energy sector, for example. You know, one of my personal favorites, Walla Walla Community College in Walla Walla, Washington. What does Washington State have? It's got great wine. I know some of you from, you know, Italy or France are like, whatever. Great wine. And so they recognize there's a sector here to be developed, and we can build a workforce that's going into this industry that's sitting here, that's ripe and that's ready. So we're seeing more building of those kinds of relationships. And then other organizations, you mentioned Europe, and I am on the board. I'm really proud of the work we do. And there are other great nonprofits as well, but we're embedding our training in community colleges as well as standalone sites, and we're working to meet demand. So we're working with a range of partners from JP Chase to American Express to Hasbro and others, and they're saying this is what we need, and we know that you can deliver because we've seen the evidence over and over, and those kinds of programs are often delivering great results for employers and for the individuals who are going through them.
That's great, thank you. And I recently read that Walla Walla program, that other countries are coming to recruit from our community college grads in Washington. So I think it goes to show that many times community colleges are overlooked. Just quickly as we move this through to this topic, I'm gonna ask you to get a little risky here. I want you to raise your hand if you have a 4-year degree. No. What would you say is out there right now? Like, now keep your hand up if you got that 4-year degree by the time you were like 22, 23 years old. Yeah, so look around. I would say that's about 95, 96% of the room.
90 most.
90 most. If you were a sample of the United States, 8% of you would still have your hand up. That you received that degree in 4 years. And only about a third of you would have your hands up that you had a 4-year degree. And so with that in mind, I ask all three of you, what is it that your company's doing to widen the lens about who talent is and how to support that talent to be successful at not just your company, but to be successful citizens and employees as they have their journey?
You want me to start? Ladies,
Sounds like you have an
ladies
answer.
first.
Sounds like you
Ladies
have an
first.
answer.
So we like to think at Walmart that it's a place where anyone can get a start because we've got jobs at very entry level. I mean, we hire data scientists and we hire meteorologists and we hire hourly associates who start in the stockroom. I mean, we talked earlier, there's 1.5 million people in the U.S. and a large portion of them don't have they have high school education. So they come to us needing training and skills in a lot of different areas. 75% of our salary manager associates in the stores started as hourly associates. And we promoted 200,000 people in our stores and clubs last year. So there's opportunity for people who are interested in starting a career and working hard, putting the time in. Our management store jobs make anywhere between $50,000 a year and $170,000 a year, depending on how well the store performs and how well you work. And many of the people in those jobs have high school diplomas. So we really believe that there's opportunity there. I mean, retail is hard work. Retail is detail, and it's a people environment, but it's a place where you could start. And as we continue to build out our academies, we think we'll develop people who have skills who could go do other things other than retail.
Mm-hmm. I'll sort of chime in and add to that. Similarly, there was a report recently issued by Opportunity Nation that said on average 26% of store managers started at the entry level. At Gap Inc., it's 53%. And to your point, it's a really good job running a store. You are essentially the CEO of the store. Ask Loretta right there; she'll tell you. It's really hard, but it's a good job. And I think the difference is that we're focused on hiring for potential. That's a phrase that we use increasingly internally. It's not about the credentials and the pond that you came from. It's about what is your potential as demonstrated through your appetite, to work hard, your work ethic, your interest in learning, and in building your skill over time. So. I know it varies by industry, and you need different skills depending on what you're pursuing. But something like retail, you can definitely start the entry level, and lots of good opportunity awaits you.
Thinking with a couple of different hats on. One, there's an initiative called Grads of Life that has brought together different nonprofit actors that focus on workforce training, with the specific intention of focusing on perception, practice, and policy, and speaking to the private sector. Recognizing that some of the biggest hurdles are, one, just the perception of who are these young people, and can they do the job, and how do we engage with them, and helping people to understand that you could be missing someone really spectacular if you overlook one of these young people. And I've heard CEOs say, these are some of the best employees that I have. They will literally run through a wall for my company, and I've watched them progress and move up the chain, as both Ben and Gail were talking about. And also, what are the policy changes that need to take place to make it easier for young people to get into the workforce, as well as the practice changes. So that's one practice that I've seen underway. At the same time, in the work that I do at the Aspen Institute, and we work with 23 communities, urban, rural, and tribal around the country. And we're also we work, as Nicole said, with FSG. And there's a program called the 100,000 Opportunities Initiative, and specifically focusing on employer-led career pathways, but also helping and working with employers so that they and their business managers and line managers understand what are the challenges? How do you navigate them? What are the additional supports? And we all, in some way, need some kind of support, no matter what your credentials are, no matter where you've come from. But specifically with this population, what may be necessary so the challenges can be met in smart and effective ways, and people don't have to repeat the same mistakes. So that's another thing that I've seen. And also inside companies, again, from being on boards and working with clients, thinking about, okay, if we brought someone in who may have a credential, maybe they've gone through a short training program and they're good for job A, but I see the potential with them. What kind of supports do we have internally that allow them to go on and get the 2-year, the associate's degree, and then perhaps go on and get that 4-year degree and make it easier? So it's everything from paying for a certain amount, or maybe for a full ride, or loan forgiveness. Those kinds of programs are often fantastic in keeping and retaining great employees and watching them move up the hierarchy of your business.
Thanks. I'm so glad you brought up these programs because I'm sure many of you are asking the question, like, well, what does this cost and how do you sell this in? And I think what you said is that, we all receive benefits that help us be successful at work. And clearly there's a cost-benefit analysis done on the benefits we all receive. And it's worth it to our employers. In order to have somebody like Deshaun succeed, there's a cost to your company, but clearly there's an ROI there. I might call that the ROI of equity. You might call that the ROI of retention. Mm-hmm. So my question to you all is, what is the ROI, and how does your company or your organizations look at the cost-benefit analysis of what it takes to get somebody to that 2-year or 4-year, or to a place where they're able to take on the next position?
Well, I'll start, if that's okay with you too. In retail, and I'm sure in a lot of other industries, there's a pretty standard calculation that to replace someone costs about 10% of that person's annual salary. And that includes everything from recruiting and identifying someone, the time it takes to interview, get someone on board, train them, and then really get them up to speed, that you're not performing at 100% right away. That takes a little time, but think about that cost. In retail, turnover is high. It's just, it's sort of consistent across pretty much every retailer that I can think of. And if we can reduce that retention, we're going to save a lot of money. So we're not constantly going through that churn of people leave and we bring in new people, but we're really investing in the people that we have. And the fact that This Way Ahead interns who became employees stayed twice as long actually saves us a lot of money. So the money that we're saving in our field payroll budgets, we're using to work with nonprofit organizations that are running job training programs. We send our employees to go and join those trainings, and how many people have employee volunteer programs in their company, and you want something that's actually really meaningful and really serves your company? It's not just go out and paint another wall, but you want something that's really meaningful and fulfilling. Well, we've created a curriculum so our employees can go in and teach skills like conflict resolution and long-term decision-making and goal setting and customer service, all the skills that you really need to be successful in a retail environment. So it becomes win-win, that the employees are getting something out of it, but that investment of time and the funding to the nonprofits net saves us money, and would rather spend the money on that than that constant churn of turnover, people going through the revolving door.
Lovely, thanks.
Well, I would say we've already seen return on the investments we've made in training and pay. We've got a measure in each one of our stores that's called Fast, Clean, and Friendly. We measure each store quarterly based on metrics tied to those. Our associate engagement is up. And our customers are telling us they like what they see through something, another measurement that is called a Net Promoter Score. The fourth quarter of last year, we had another quarter of comparable comps 1.8% comp in our stores on the numbers that we're turning in our stores is a big deal. So, so we know that the investment we made is paying off, and it's actually showing up at the bottom line.
Nice.
Well, thinking about this from the supply side and the work at Year Up, again, we work very, very closely with employers, and the program requires 6 months of in-house training for the students, technical training for them, and then a 6-month internship. So it's the internship process where they're going to work every day at some of the companies that I have mentioned, and many, many more all over the United States. And what we're looking at, one is how do we drive down the cost of our training so that we can access more students, so that we can help more young people. Nicole mentioned over 5 million young people fall in the Opportunity Youth category. And the way we're doing that is by embedding in community colleges. We're finding that that is a smart way to put ourselves into a larger system and to reach more young people. So we're looking to drive down the cost, but at the same time, we're thinking about that relationship with the employer. And one of kind of the gold standard for us is if a young person goes through an internship program, which is essentially for an employer, a very inexpensive way to see, do I like this potential worker?
Try before you buy.
Exactly. And we think that we are doing well when that employer then goes on to hire that young person. And we are approaching about a 50% hire rate for young people who come out of those internship programs and are hired by that same employer. I mean, the vast majority of our students go on to get jobs somewhere, but when someone has worked with you and said, yeah, you're good, and I want to bring you on full time, that's one of the things that we see as being important. The other thing is looking at the employer satisfaction rate based on the internship. And I can tell you that we've got about a 93, 94% employer satisfaction rate with our program. So we're constantly looking to refine and to develop, but those are ways that are telling us that we are getting a return on the investment for the resources that we're investing in the young people.
Those are great answers. Thank you. And I think there's a lot more data. I'll plug FSG has a report about frontline worker retention, which is provided to you here. We have some copies of it, as well as it's on our website. And in that, we state that in 2016, it was a $9 billion worth of loss in the retail industry alone because of retention and turnover. And so these are real numbers. And so when we talk about the business value, this isn't just about retention. There's also issues of innovation. There's issues of diversity and inclusion. There's issues of reaching new target markets. And so there's many more business value pieces than just retention, as these folks said. I want to invite Deshawn back up and encourage you all to put questions in and vote on your questions. I know I saw a couple that came through for Deshawn as well. Come on back up, Deshawn. And I'm actually going to go with this third one for a second, because I think this is a really interesting question, which is how does socioeconomic diversity, in contrast to ethnic diversity, influence your programs? I think that workforce has been at the forefront of this country's mind. And
I mean, I think this is the critical importance of having nonprofit partners to be your collaborators, that we would not simply go into a new community and say, you know, here we are, we know everything about the young adults living in this community, that in every new city when we roll out This Way Ahead, we find a nonprofit partner who has those connections with the community and therefore really understands the socioeconomic, the ethnic, on all levels, what the needs are, you know, what the challenges are that the young people in that community might be experiencing, and then how to support them, how to help them overcome those barriers so they can be successful when they get to work. So our assumption is we don't have all the answers. We don't pretend to have all, you know, the detailed information community by community on questions like that. Therefore, we rely on organizations in every city where This Way Ahead exists to be our really critical partner. I'll also say, since we were talking about Year Up, is the reason we don't feel that we need a version of This Way Ahead for our headquarters jobs is because we work with Europe so consistently that they brought in great talent into our tech department, and anybody, they're US based only still, right? If you're in a US based company and you're looking for talent, go to europe.org.
Thank you.
There's your
And I'll just add that the research is very clear that disproportionately of the 5.5 million young people who are out of work and out of school are disproportionately young people of color. It's just, it is the fact. And so if you're seeking to work with opportunity youth, that is your pool. And clearly poverty as well. Is there anything to add?
Yeah, the thing I'd add, at least for us, is if you think about 90% of the US population lives within 10 miles of a Walmart. And so the things that are happening in our community, when things happen like what happened at Ferguson or what happened in Baton Rouge or what happened in Orlando, it impacts our business, it impacts the associates who work in our business, and it impacts the communities that we're servicing. And so this notion of social justice and economic justice in the communities that we work in is an issue that we need to address as business people. And I think it's a new frontier, and it could either be a great growth opportunity for our businesses, or it could be something that causes things that have happened in the past, bad things that have happened in our history when you don't pay attention to what's happening in those communities. And so we spent a lot of time talking about it internally. We held a huge town hall to talk about the issues because they all happened around the same time, the shooting in Dallas as well. And we worked with the foundation to really create grants to focus on how do you improve relationships between police officers and the communities that you service in. And it's been interesting because there aren't a lot of people in these communities that are skilled in actually doing that work. So we started doing that last year. We'll do some more with the foundation. But it's a real concern for us in our business.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Deshaun?
It's got 9 votes.
Yeah, you've got 9 votes. You're winning. If this were a reality show, you'd be the one standing. So how has This Way Ahead influenced how you think about your career and your loyalty to Old Navy?
So being in TWA, before being in TWA, going into Old Navy, you would never think Old Navy is how it is now. You would just think that they're here for you to buy clothes. But TWA have brought me into Old Navy and showed me that it's way more than that. That they are really big on engagement, and the engagement piece from the leadership team to the associates is really amazing, and it trickles down to the associates to the customers, and it's just really amazing how determined the leadership team with Old Navy is towards the associates. We invested so much time into them, and being through TWA, if I didn't go through TWA, I wouldn't know that now.
That's great. Thanks. Do you want to add anything to that? He did a pretty good job.
Yeah, he's the expert.
Yeah, actually, thanks. Thanks, Deshaun. This next most highly rated question, I think, is a really important one because we're hearing again and again that it takes leadership to spur opening the lens about who talent is. Has to come from the top, but then folks in the business are actually doing the work to make it happen. So how do you generate support among leadership? What have you seen that works both at your company and other companies?
Well, one of the things that I've seen is literally when the leadership of the company starts to engage with the workforce that we're talking about, the potential workforce that we're talking about. And some of the most moving conversations, and I think you are reflecting on the same experience. It's a large hiring fair that took place in Chicago a couple of summers ago. And there were CEOs from across a range of sectors who literally just spent time with young people, really pretty racially diverse, but significantly low income, and hearing about their experiences and why they wanted to work, what they had accomplished to get to the point that they were applying for these jobs, And you could watch, and not just watch, but hear many of those leaders say, this was a moment where a light bulb went off for me in understanding the potential that exists in this workforce. And then watching that translate down to the HR managers and other senior leaders in their companies. And it became a rallying cry for those companies to start to do that work. Now, at the same time, and I mentioned this before, it's really important that people understand the challenges. As with anything, and you all know this, you're business leaders, there is never a straight line. It is not without hurdles. But to understand what may happen and understand what best practices are to deal with those challenges along the way. But watching that was an opportunity to watch a range of companies, significant global companies, decide that they were going to make those investments, and then at the same time watch along the way medium-sized companies and smaller companies raise their hands and say, we want to be a part of this as well.
Just to build on that, I think it's also like anything else that we do in business, start small, learn, make sure that you're positioning these new hires for success. I think that, more than anything, you want to make sure that when you bring someone in and you're making a commitment to them, have you done your homework in preparing them before the interview even happens? Once they get hired, do you have the supports in place so they get the training they need? I mean, Deshaun and Loretta were telling me before the session today, Deshaun was asking Loretta every day of the week, every day he showed up for work, about the new thing that he wanted to learn about. Loretta could have said, I don't have time for that, but she didn't. We had Loretta's buy-in from the start, and her peer store managers across the country similarly, that they are prepared for what they're signing up for. They know it's going to be a commitment of time, and they want to do it because they've seen now that they've been involved in small ways that it's worth it, because they're getting really great talent coming into their stores. So I think it's like, again, anything else, it's not rocket science. Start small. Make sure you get it right. I'm working with Nicole on the Innovation Lab impact hiring process. I'm sure she's got lots of stuff she could share about what she's beginning to learn, what works, what not to do. There's certainly lots of lessons in our 10 years that I would say, don't do that no matter what. But build over time and figure out who the advocates you need. Sometimes it's the CEO, sometimes it's the store manager or the district manager or the regional manager or the local HR expert or the loss prevention manager. We have a great loss prevention track in This Way Ahead, because LP thought that this would be a great way for them to get new LP agents. And they're off and running. They're super excited about it. So it's probably different in every company, but I think, start and get it right and make sure that you're positioning these new hires for success.
Good. Thanks. We're running out of time. So I just want to follow up on something that Gail said. So through generous support from the Rockefeller Foundation and Walmart, at FSG we have something called the Impact Hiring Initiative, where we're building a smaller community of companies innovating and trying to learn how to do this work and providing them a community and some consulting support to do that, and then a larger community of companies who want to learn those lessons from the pioneers and innovators. And so please seek me out or any member of the FSG team if you want to learn more about that or you're interested in joining our work. I'd like to invite you all to thank these very generous panel members for sharing their lessons learned in themselves. Thank you.